Hello, everyone. We want to welcome you back. This is week number 2, episode number 2 of our fall 2023, and we are having a great time. We have asked back Andrew and Amy Hébert. Andrew is our lead pastor, and by the way, I should always say this. I'm Brandon Watson, Connect Pastor here, the host. It'd be good if I started that way, wouldn't it, Keri?
I don't know. You're super humble, so maybe not. Yes. We'll just tack that on at the end.
So humble.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. I'm feeling that now.
Feeling the love.
And Keri Montgomery is our co-host, and we are talking about weekly marriage conversations. And we did a little intro and talked about our families last episode. So we'll just kind of probably forego that for this episode. But if you missed that first episode, we want to encourage you to go back. In fact, we will talk a little bit about some of the questions that we talked about episode 1 in case you miss it. These are weekly conversations that really just help you as a marriage couple connect well with each other. You get to hear what's going on in their heart and their mind, and be a part of that. And we found out that you want to ask the question why multiple times after these questions. But question number 1 was, what brought you joy this week? Question number 2, what was hard or challenging for you this week? Question number 3, what can I do for you this week about service? How can I serve you? And then question number 4, how can I pray for you? Which we talked about was very important, about listening to what's on the heart and mind of your spouse. So we're going to jump in because I just really enjoyed engaging in the conversation with you guys last week about this. And what we've talked about, Keri and I talked about this earlier, about how these questions almost start getting, you get deeper into the water as these questions go.
Yeah,
right?
and you have to become more and more vulnerable, which that kind of takes us to question number 5. Do you have any unconfessed sin or unaddressed hurt or unresolved conflict? And I know for me, I'm not going to open up and be vulnerable if I have not already felt a level of trust with my spouse. So I like how even these are ordered. How does that question kind of come, how does that look like when y'all have conversation? Is it something that the other person might get defensive about if they hear this? Or what kind of response do you get from each other?
I mean, it's heavy.
It is.
Yeah. It's the hardest question, without a doubt. You know, there's so much that I could say here. You know, what I would just say is this, in general, sin flourishes in the dark. Mm-hmm. And in our marriage, we have had times early on in our marriage where we hid our sin from each other. Yeah. And that caused great pain and woundedness later. So we've kind of learned this lesson the hard way in our marriage. It took 7 years for us to figure this one out, but that when you bring sin to the light and expose it, it loses its power. Mm-hmm. And when you can be aware of each other's temptations and sins, it helps you to battle against it together. Yeah. I now have a friend and partner to help me, who I know is going to pray for me, you know, that kind of thing. And so this is actually a really, really important question. It's a hard one to ask and answer, especially initially, until you kind of get in the habit of it. Once you become more comfortable asking this question and answering it, what you start to do, what we've found, at least in our marriage, is that we begin to keep shorter accounts. So if you know that question's coming right at the end of the week, what we found is we most of the time don't wait until the end of the week to talk about that thing. So if there was something we did to hurt each other, or there's some sin that needed to be addressed, or conflict issue, we try to keep short accounts and just deal with it, you know, closer to when that happens.
I would say the other thing is it also helps you on the flip side, because you know that question is coming. You know, there may be something on Monday, I didn't sleep well, and I got up and I'm in a really bad mood, and so maybe something bothered me, but I know this question is coming, and so I can kind of hold off on my, hey, that hurt my feelings, because I might be able to just say, okay, I'm going to give this a little bit of time to breathe, and then realize it actually wasn't a big deal.
Yeah.
And so
That's a good point.
It can go both ways. You know, when there is an actual problem, you can deal with it immediately because you know we're going to talk about it on Friday anyway.
Yeah.
Or you can say, maybe this morning it's actually not him, it's me.
Yeah.
And you can, by the time you get to Friday, realize that wasn't really a thing, and it's okay that I let that go.
Yeah.
There is a series of questions that I heard from Greg Mott one time where he said, you know, you need to ask the question, okay, is this an episode? Is it a rerun, or is it a series? Yeah. And so we've learned in our marriage, you know, there might be little small things. You know, the book of 1 Peter chapter 4 says that love covers a multitude of sins.
Right.
And so there's sometimes, okay, we woke up Monday morning, we're both tired, maybe we're a little edgy, and there was little snippy comments or something like that. And it's okay to just say, you know what, we don't need to hash that out. I'm going to cover that one. And we don't have to have a big discussion about it, and we don't have to have apologies and tears and all the things. We can just kind of cover it. A lot of times when that happens for us, we've got this little thing in our house called the reset button. Mm-hmm. So if we've kind of been a butt to each other,
Can we say that on the podcast?
I think so.
I don't know.
Okay. So we'll say, you know, do you want to hit the reset button? And we'll say, yes. That just means, do we want to just kind of clear the deck here and start over? And this is our reset button. It's right here. And we'll press it. It's imaginary, and it just works for us. We giggle, and it's just like, okay, we got to start over.
It's an acknowledgement. You know? We've both kind of been terrible this morning, and we're just going to let it all go and start over.
So if it's a small thing, you know, an episode type of a thing, we'll just say, okay, we can cover that. If it's a rerun, if it's a series, this is a bigger thing, then that's where we need to have that conversation.
And I think it's important that you have to be careful, because you can get stuck.
Right.
And you can get in the ditch in this question, especially if there's something that's just been stewing for a while, and then all of a sudden, if you don't talk about it, and then it just erupts, you know, or you just have a hard time coming to an agreement on something. Mm-hmm. I can imagine, I think we can all have a sigh of relief that no one has the absolute perfect marriage. And we all need grace from the Lord and grace from each other, and forgiveness. So I think it's when you think about this question about unresolved conflict, you know, that can stir up a lot. And how do you not just really just get stuck there?
Yeah.
I think one thing we really try to do is deal with what's in front of us at the moment.
Yeah.
So if there's something that's kind of been stewing, there's a way to really weaponize that. Mm-hmm. But there's also a way to say, okay, this is something that happened right now, and it hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
And, you know, this has happened before, and I've, you know, tried to cover it or whatever. But I think there's a way to try to come to your spouse and just say, you know, I love you enough. If it's a sin issue, you know, you have done something that's really hurt me. You love your spouse enough to say, this is something that is just not great. And, you know, as a brother or sister in Christ, this needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
But I think it's really important not to, like I said, don't weaponize that. You're not going in for an attack. You're on the same team, and you're doing it in love, because that's the way you would want it done if it comes back your direction too. Yeah. So.
And you want the gospel to be at the center of the marriage.
Yeah.
So we want to remind each other. We want to preach the gospel to each other.
Right.
Remind each other of forgiveness and grace in Christ, etc. I will say, just adding in a word here, there are some times when there's something that's messy enough that you can't just fix it in a conversation. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, our marriage is not perfect. We often say our marriage is the best part of our life. It's also the hardest part of our life.
Yeah.
And we've had really tough times in our marriage that we've had to work through, and at times even to see a counselor. And so we recommend that. There are times when you need help because I'm an idiot and I'm a sinner and she's a sinner. And when sinners are married to one another, you can have a lot of brokenness there. And so going to a counselor can be so helpful to have an outside perspective to just help you see things you can't see for yourself. I remember telling a counselor one time about something we were walking through, and she just listened to the tone of my voice, and she's like, "Do you always talk that way? Like, you're so harsh in your tone." And I'm like, "I'm not harsh, you know."
What are you talking about?
What are you talking about? I'd never even thought of that. Amy had never said that. But the counselor coming in from the outside was able to hear, okay, there's something in my tone of voice that's harsh and not kind, not gentle with my wife. Well, that was very revelatory.
Yeah.
For me, it was helpful. So, you know, there may be some things even that come out that you need to have longer term help to work through this. The good news is there's no mess that you can get into that Jesus is not big enough to rescue you out of.
Right.
So there is hope for every marriage. It just might take work to get out of the pit.
Yeah. Yeah. And a good little marriage tip is you can call yourself an idiot. But
Yes.
Yes. Okay. There.
Yeah. Notice I didn't
Did
call
you
her an
notice that?
idiot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
She is a sinner.
We're
Yeah.
And
But
not
that's
an
that's
idiot.
on the fine line. I mean, yeah.
It's right,
No,
right on the edge.
Yeah. Okay. So that brings us to question number 6. Are there any dreams, cravings, or desires you have this week? And are we talking about cookies?
Or bacon.
Maybe.
And
Sometimes.
ice cream?
Sometimes.
I mean, obviously, there's different levels where this question could go. And what are some different ways that you guys have approached it?
What do you find yourself daydreaming about? Is it cookies? I mean, do you really just need a minute
It
to
is for me.
sit in your chair and just eat a warm cookie? That's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's a really busy season and I'm daydreaming about vacation or something like that. So I think it can go any direction.
Or is it closeness? You know, sometimes, when I know Claire will, whenever I know that we need to have a conversation, she says, "I'm feeling distant from you." That's okay, the flag has been run up the pole. It's time for me to slow down and figure out what's going on. And so that craving or desire might just be to feel close to each other.
That's great. It can be the big things or the small things, and everything in between. So, we've been here a year. This time a year ago, a little longer than a year ago, we talked about dreams for Mobberly.
Yeah.
That was a part of that conversation in that season. Sometimes it is like I dream about Friday where we can go get tacos and have a great family day. That's okay. That's a small thing.
Yeah.
But it's okay to say that, or a vacation, or I've got a book idea I'm thinking about writing, and just kind of talk that out. Or it might be something, 5 years from now, we're already thinking about our 20th anniversary and we've been talking about what we might want to do for that. So any of those things can be in that question.
Yeah. Okay, super. Let's look at question number 7.
All right, number 7 has to do with money. How are we handling our finances? I have found it seems like most couples, one seems like a saver, one seems like a spender. I know that's in our relationship, and so finances can be a touchy subject. So how does that question usually play out? Is there a good time to ask this? Is there not a good time to ask this question?
Finances that's a big point of conflict in a lot of marriages, a point of stress. Amy and I have very different approaches to money. We had to figure that out early on in our marriage. I'm a spender. Amy is the saver. She's very wise with money, very good with money.
So cheap.
Me too. Me too.
Honestly, this is the honest truth. I don't know how much money we have. I have no idea. I don't like knowing. It stresses me out to think about it. I want to know that we've got enough, but Amy really handles the finances in our house, and I spend it. And we work together to kind of negotiate, what's the fun money
Does
that
that
we can
cause
spend.
stress for one person?
Not for me.
Oh, well, sure.
I think, there are some months or weeks that I have to say, we spent a lot of money this week. Maybe a tree fell down, or a, dishwasher broke, or gosh, all those kids and all their activities.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it is actually good to have this. This one is actually more of a monthly question. The way that the book structured it, it was once a month you would talk about these last two. And so I feel like finances, I mean, unless there's something just major that comes up, once a month is probably okay to just say, we have money in the bank.
Yeah.
You know, or it's also good to know, hey, this huge expense is coming up. So we both need to back off of our spending a little or things like that.
That really is in our marriage. Every couple is different, but in our marriage, that is kind of how the conversation goes. You know, Amy's more aware of those types of things, and so we'll just have a point of conversation about it. When we think about generosity, you know, gifts above and beyond our tithe, we'll talk about that. You know, we want to give to something. How much are we going to give? What are we going to give to? That's a point of conversation that you can have right there. So it's just to stay on the same page in terms of how you're approaching your money.
And I will say on another note with that, I think part of that is because we do make a budget every year. Usually we sit down and kind of look at, hey, this is how much everything costs. And so we actually both already know, generally speaking, where the money's going. And so we don't have to sit down and have a budget conversation every month. It's more like, okay, did we overspend on this, or was there an unexpected something? So it's
you said we very generously. So thank you for thank you for including me in that.
How many times have you heard this? Okay, let's pull back the reins a little.
A few times.
Yeah, okay.
A few times.
I don't know.
I think I've heard that.
But I will say, Amy's wise with finances, but she has a very generous heart. And so we want to, you know, money is one of those things, if you just try to cling to it, it's never enough. And if you're open-handed with it, where it can flow out of your hand to others, it seems like the Lord always sends enough, you know, to take care of your needs.
And I will say generosity goes not just outward, but when you have someone who likes to have fun, right? That's the beauty of a marriage, is that you balance each other out in a lot of ways. So our kids would never have any fun if it was just me. So it's good to be able to appreciate what each other bring to the table on that. So with finances, you know, it's also good to say, you know what? Thank you for taking us all to the water park on Friday. And so it is fun actually to get to balance that part of each other out. But yeah.
I mean, it can be a point of contention. I mean, obviously, you know, talking with marriages and especially doing some premarital meetings with couples, you know, finances, family, all those things are big, you know, hot buttons, you know.
I always tell couples that we're doing premarital counseling with, have a plan, you know, that means a budget. Work as a team. You know, however you're going to approach it, you need to do it together. There's a trend these days for a husband to have a bank account and a wife to have a bank account. They don't know what's happening in each other's bank accounts.
Dangerous.
That's very dangerous, unwise, foolish. I'll actually say it that strongly. It's foolish. And so, you know, have a plan, have a budget, do it together as a team.
Right. That's good. That's good. Okay. We are going to go to question number 8. And I want to tell parents at home that we're going to talk about sex life as a married couple. And the question is, how is our sex life? And that's very, very important as well, because sometimes when people come into marriage, they bring in baggage or they bring in things of what they think that's going to look like. And so this is a question that you have as a married couple, and it's not very often that we get to talk to our lead pastor and his wife publicly about this, but I think it's so important, and I think it's valuable to talk about. And so I want to pose this question about how you approach it, but also want to jump into what really kind of dictates a healthy sex life for a couple. So we just threw it out there.
Okay. So this is maybe an unusual question for some people.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember sex is a creation of God. It's a good gift.
Right.
And so this should not be difficult to talk about.
Right.
The church should own this. Christian people should be able to talk about this more comfortably, really, than anybody even in the culture. And so, but one of the reasons that this question can be difficult is because sometimes in a marriage, people have had different experiences or different approaches to the whole topic of sex, and that can make that difficult. So there are kind of three major ways that people think about sex. One is thinking about sex as God. And it's the most important thing, and it's really become an idol. And some people have had sexual addictions, or they've had sexual promiscuity in their past, something like that, and it's really become this dominant thing in their life,
Right.
Where they almost worship it, and it's unhealthy in that way. The other way of viewing sex is as gross. And so, some people grew up in a household where you didn't say the S word, and it's kind of very a Victorian sort of prudish approach to the whole topic.
Right.
Or maybe because of sexual abuse or something like that, there's kind of been this very negative association or a thought that that's a sinful, dirty thing that we don't talk about. And so imagine if you have one who's had a very sexually promiscuous past and maybe somebody else who's been sexually abused, and now they're married.
Yeah.
How do you approach that?
Right.
So that can be very difficult. The biblical view is sex is not God and sex is not gross. Sex is a gift, and it's a gift from God to be enjoyed within the confines of marriage.
Right.
And it's a gift that you give to one another. It's for mutual enjoyment and joy and intimacy. And it's a good gift from God. So this gives us an opportunity to just say, kind of check in, just like we would check in on our finances or anything else, to say, how is our sex life? Are we having sex? Is it good?
Yeah.
That's a good first question.
Yeah. Are you having sex? That's one question.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how many
yeah.
couples don't, or
Yeah.
it's like, well, I can't really remember the last time or something like that. And so you want to make sure that you are having a good, healthy sex life, and that it's for your spouse's good, and for your good. So
Yeah.
but you asked a second question, which
Yes. What would you say is a good framework for a healthy sex life? Because if you find yourself, there's so many different things that come into that, of just, being exhausted, being, schedule, or like you said, past hurts and things like that go into that. The kids come into the picture.
always
Pets, she's laughing.
I did too.
I know. I think that's funny. Some people have
These doors, they have these things on them called a lock.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So I'm just.
So, Amy, do you want to
that out
talk about maybe sex in different seasons of life?
Yeah.
And how that changes depending on,
Sure.
if you have kids or.
Yes, and I also would say if there has been hurt or any kind of sexual pain, so that would be abuse or promiscuity or anything like that, it is helpful to have this conversation. And also that would be another place where I would say maybe bring in a counselor. If you're consistently talking about this question and you're just kind of like, I don't really want to have this conversation, or maybe, one or both of you just is saying our sex life isn't great, it's okay to bring in a counselor for something like that too, because there may be issues happening underneath that you just don't even know about. You really just don't even recognize it's inhibiting that relationship. What was the second part? What was the question that you had?
Just how your sex life changes.
Yeah.
Through different seasons of life.
Yeah. So, newlyweds, man, you're excited and you're raring to go. Hopefully you've been waiting this whole time, and take your Gatorade.
What does she mean, Keri?
I don't know. It's been a long time since I was a newlywed.
But then, you have jobs or you have kids, and your life can be exhausting. And so there are days when one or both of you may be saying, I'm really not in the mood. And that's where I think you have to go back to sexuality in our marriage is actually not for me only.
Yeah.
It's a gift. And so, are you really that tired that you can't enjoy that? Kind of a question. And on the flip side, maybe your spouse needs to hear you say, I'm so exhausted. So it's okay, again, to just be honest with each other.
Right.
I think this is a really good place to have honest conversations where, we've had seasons where our kids, when they were really little, it was very demanding physically. And so there is a lot of exhaustion in that season.
Right.
Or maybe, you go through a season of job transition or something like that, and you're just very busy. It's okay to put it on the calendar and say, hey, we're having a date on this place at this time, and we're going to have sex this night, and don't let anything take over your calendar,
Yeah.
But there are seasons where you may literally have to calendar it just to keep yourself from going 2, 3, 4 weeks without being intimate with each other.
Right. Now I know why you do your own calendar.
That's good. In terms of what makes a healthy sex life,
Yeah.
Let me just say a couple things here. One, even biblically, there are times that it's okay not to have sex. Paul talks about, taking a break for the purpose of prayer or fasting.
Yeah.
Peter talks about living with your wife in an understanding way as a precious treasure, a precious vessel. So there might be times where consideration to your spouse says, you know what, tonight we're just going to go to bed early and go to sleep because that's what we both want to do,
Right.
or that's what you need tonight. So the purpose of sex, here's a key thing. In Christian sexuality, the purpose of sex is not my personal pleasure.
Right.
It's a way to bring joy to my spouse and to increase intimacy in our friendship. And so if you approach sex with, this is what I can get out of it, or this is for me,
Right.
then there's all kinds of problems that can happen, and you're going to be selfish, and you might not consider your spouse and what she needs. If you both enter that relationship looking for how you can serve your spouse, then there might be a night where Amy's best served by, we're not going to have sex tonight,
Yeah.
and we're just going to go to bed early, or she, or what have you. So consideration of
Yeah.
your spouse is a big part of that. When I talk with premarital couples, so I always tell them when they're asking about what makes, for a great sex life, I share 4 F's
Okay.
with them.
All right.
Okay. So.
Our antennas are up.
Okay, good. All right.
Okay.
So, great Christian sex
Yes.
is free,
Free. That's good. That is good.
fun,
Yes.
frequent,
Okay.
and freaky.
Okay.
Freaky.
Okay. All right.
Wow.
So let me just say
You
a
heard
word.
it here first on the Empower Equipment.
Okay, let me say a word about each of those 4. Free. What I mean by that is this is not something you lord over each other
Right.
or hold as a chip, a bargaining chip. So,
Yeah.
Okay, you mowed the lawn, therefore you
Yeah.
get some.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
not the way. So we're going to be free with but the other sense in which I mean that word is sex before marriage and sex outside of marriage is not free.
Right.
You're never really fully yourself. You're always holding back. There's shame there. Not so in Christian marriage. You can be free with one another.
Yeah.
It's sex without shame
Yes.
within Christian marriage. Okay. What's the second one? Fun.
Fun.
If you read the song, the Bible has a whole book about sex
Yeah.
and marriage and romance. Song of Solomon.
I'm waiting for that series.
I've preached through Song of Solomon before a couple times, and that may happen again at some point. But you find that, again, the Christian sex is not this sort of Victorian thing, where you must lie there and do your duty to God and country, kind of thing. It's fun. There's pleasure, there's joy there. You see
Right.
all kinds of expressions of that in the Song of Solomon. Escapades where they escape together, sex outdoors, all kinds of other things in the Song of Solomon and other passages in Scripture. So it should be fun. Not Victorian, this is something for your pleasure that God has given to you as a gift. Frequent. Okay, that just means you ought to be having sex regularly. If you can't remember the last time you had sex with your spouse, it's been too long. So frequent is different based on season. I mean, that goes back to what Amy said. It might be once a week. It might be 5 times a week.
Yeah.
It just kind of depends on the season. But
Unless you have
should be
short-term
regular.
memory loss.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. And then freaky. What do I mean by that? All I mean is this. It's amazing how many couples, and by couples I mean how many men sometimes will come and ask me,
Right.
Pastor, is this okay in the bedroom? And
Yeah.
usually it's on a hunting trip when they finally feel comfortable enough to be honest with me, that they'll finally ask me the questions they've been meaning to ask me the whole time.
Okay.
And so here's what I would just say. As long as it's not illegal in 28 states,
Yes.
as long as it's not involving another person
Right.
or anything immoral,
Right.
so things like pornography, inclusion of another person,
Right.
things of that nature. And as long as it is good and beneficial for both of you and mutually agreeable,
Yeah.
then anything's on the table. And so, again, this is a good gift God has given to married couples to enjoy.
Well, cool. Well, that's been fun. We handled 8 questions, 8 weekly questions. You were quiet.
I was just listening.
Yeah, you were. I mean, it's really important to talk about. I mean, not just that, but also all these questions. And so I hope that these questions will be beneficial to you and your marriage and you and your spouse. And we hope that they'll draw you closer together, closer to God. We want to thank you again for joining us on the Empower and Equip podcast. Remember, you can find us on Spotify. You can find us on Apple and Google podcasts, and also on the Mobberly website. We'll have these these questions posted where you can download those, or we just welcome you to come to Mobberly and we'll hand you these questions and you can come visit us, and we'd be glad to get those to you as well. Again, we want to thank the Héberts for joining us and talking about some very important things. And then Keri, thanks for being a great co-host.
It was fun.
And we'll see you next week here on the Empower Equip podcast. Have a great one.